Right, are we ready to go?
Yeah.
Excellent. So, hi everyone. This is the talk on what it takes to be a farm advisor. We've got Catherine Oddy on the call, who's Senior Farm Advisor at the Ribble Rivers Trust. We've got Ellie Brown, who is Strategic Evidence and GIS Officer at the Ribble Rivers Trust, and Heather Worley, who is another farm advisor from the Ribble Rivers Trust as well. You are being recorded, and I believe that message has gone in the chat as well. So if you aren't happy to be recorded, please turn your videos off. And we also ask that you keep yourself muted throughout. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat function. I'll be keeping an eye on that, so no questions get missed, and we'll address them all at the end of the presentations. But for now, I think Catherine is going to start talking, and yeah, over to you.
So hello everyone, welcome to the What Makes a Farm Advisor talk. I'm just waiting for Ellie, could you share your screen? Thank you. So yes, this is the What Makes a Farm Advisor talk. Basically, we wanted this to be a discussion so that everybody could get involved. I think farm advice is changing over the next few years, and I know we're finding it hard to keep up with all of the needs and requirements going forward, and it's one that we're facing and we're definitely on top of, but it's one that we want to keep up with, and it's not always easy to share best practice or knowledge with everyone, especially somebody in a similar role, especially over the past 2 years with COVID. So we thought this would be quite a nice presentation to do and to get all people's experiences and share best practice with everybody as well. So on the next slide, we're just going to show you what we're hoping to run through today. Basically, we didn't think we could run this event without actually saying what we do ourselves in the land management team. And so what we're going to do is basically I'm going to go through who we are as the Ribble Rivers Trust and how we go about farm advice within it. Heather Worley's then going to just do a bit more on farm advice and how we deliver farm advice in the catchments. We then have Ellie, who's going to be focusing on our evidence and data within the trust and how we use that to look at more targeted decisions. And then we've got a few questions as well, which we'd like to discuss with you at the end. So on the next slide, just so you've got them in your minds, we have got a few questions. So what do farmers want from farm advice? How do we improve farm advice for farmers and land managers? What data and evidence do you use to make decisions? Do farm advisors and farmers have the evidence and data they need to make farm business decisions? And what does the future of farm advice look like? So we're going to go into the presentation now, but if you could keep those questions in your mind going forward, and have a think about what you do in your roles, or if you're a farmer, what you would like from us as farm advisors. If you just go into the next slide. So as I said, I was just going to introduce the Ribble Rivers Trust. So we are a charitable organisation, and we are basically part of the umbrella body of the Rivers Trust, but we work independently. The trust was actually established in 1998 by a group of local people, and the aim was to restore, protect and enhance the Ribble and all of its tributaries. As we are a charity, we don't have any statutory powers at all. So we do work very closely with partners in the area, different organisations, to help and collaborate with projects. And that's how it's always been. In terms of land management advice, we've actually been working in catchments for 10 years, so just over a decade, and it's something that has grown and grown over the past few years. So just go on the next slide. So just to give you a little bit of an idea, in terms of Rivers Trust, it differs across England in terms of how many staff they've got. We actually have 25 staff at the moment, and we cover all catchment management work. So we do have an education team. So that team goes out to schools and works with school children, looking at invertebrates and basically any issues involving rivers, and trying to engage with children to teach them about the river environment. We do have a data and evidence team, which Ellie leads, which is absolutely fantastic. They keep us up to date with absolutely everything we need, and I'm not going to say anything else because Ellie's going to speak about that later. We have a conservation team who basically go out and do work such as weir removals and fish passages, and we have a land management team, and that is a team that I lead. I'm going to go and talk about that in a second. Just go on to the next slide. So there are 4 pillars of work that we do to conserve rivers, and these are the 4 areas that we're really focused on. So we do look at water quality and water quantity, so anything such as removing sources of diffuse water pollution, mitigating that diffuse water pollution, and improving capacity of the landscape to filter pollutants. That's something that we particularly focus on, and also flood alleviation and river flashiness. But we're also very focused on habitats, the quantity of that and the quality of it as well. So anything that we look at, we're trying to pick out opportunities for the farmer or land manager to help them to improve it and enhance their farm business. Just go on the next slide. So a little bit of an introduction to the actual land management team. So this is kind of split in 2. We have a farm advice team and we have a woodland team. We cover the whole of the Ribble catchment and a little bit beyond now, but we start in the Ribble Head, which is in the Yorkshire Dales, and we work all the way down to the coast at St Anne's, so our patch is quite big. We have a mixture and a variety of farms in the catchment. We have livestock farms, mixed farms and arable farms, which means that it does keep us on our toes in terms of advice, but the way we approach each farm is completely the same. We want to make sure that the farmer trusts us, that they know that they can work with us, so that we're not just helping to improve the environment or water environment, but we're actually trying to improve and support their farm business as well. And that's how we've always approached every single farm. And to do this, we've worked with farmers in a variety of different ways, and Heather's going to go on to that in a second. But we work with groups, we work on training events, we help with countryside stewardship application, woodland applications, we help to develop schemes with farmers. But the main thing is that anything that we develop works for the farmer and doesn't affect his management in a huge way, and actually helps and supports his farm business. So I am going to stop talking now, and I'm going to hand over to Heather, who's going to go on a bit more about our farm advice and how we deliver it within the Ribble catchment.
Evening, everybody. Yep, so farm advice, you can skip to the next slide, Ellie. As Catherine's already mentioned, we do a lot of farmer engagement, be this one-to-one visits that provide free and confidential advice to farmers about things that they can implement on the farm to help improve both the farm business and the environment. We also do diffuse water pollution training events. This year we've done some at Meyerscough. We've targeted young farmers in the area, land managers and agents, local vet groups, and also we have some farm groups of our own. Catherine heads up one of our farm groups in the Loud area, Loud catchment, and I have one in the Long Preston area. We talk to them about soil management, rush management, all different areas. We get speakers in to talk about the different various management implementations they can make on the farm to improve the farm business as well as the environment. And we are hoping to create more farm groups in the near future. Also, I mean, COVID's not helped with this, but we have in the past done local agricultural shows, and we are hoping to start that again next year. So when we are actually working with farmers, we're quite fortunate that all of our farm advisors are farmers' daughters or farmers' sons. So it's good because even though we're working for an environmental charity, we can have a farm business head on our shoulders. So whenever we go to a farmer or they approach us, the first and foremost question that we ask is, what do you want? You know, why are you contacting us? Do you want help with getting grants, or are you been targeted by the EA for a diffuse water pollution issue? Basically, we ask them, it's all about them and their farm business. And we're always looking at it as a whole farm approach. So typically when we go to these farms, we do these pinpoint visits. We focus at the start on the actual farmyard and the farmyard infrastructure, looking at how we can improve that through grants or schemes to help develop work such as concrete or roof or rainwater goods to help us then in turn meet our environmental targets to help prevent diffuse water pollution issues. Then we'll take a walk around the farm and we'll have a look at what other aspects of the land management we can help to improve or provide advice upon. And then, well, if they have a water course through the farm yard or the holding, we can help to offer advice and support for riparian buffer strips or riparian woodlands. Yeah, so all of our advice is free and confidential. But when we actually look at these whole farm projects, we do go in with our own ideas about what would benefit us from a water quality perspective. But it's also very important that we collaborate with other local bodies, because obviously we can go to a farm and they'll say, oh, we want to plant this in trees, and we might think, well, actually this is quite a nice weirder habitat, or we'll go somewhere else and we'll be like, actually there's a priority grassland here with some rare species of botanical interest. So it's good to have other people, other organisations who will work and collaborate with farmers as well as us to help develop a whole farm scheme. We work with the RSPB, we have a Forest of All and AONB in our catchment, and we also work with Natural England, the Environmental Agency and the Forestry Commission. Alongside our farm advice, we also offer assistance for higher tier, mid-tier countryside stewardship schemes, as well as standalone capital grants. And this year we have been involved in the Sustainable Farming Incentive Pilot. And then we obviously have the woodland team that if farmers do make the decision that they want to move ahead with some woodland, we can help them with their application for the woodland creation offer, the UCO or the woodland grant through CS. Next slide, Ellen. Like I said, it's always a whole farm approach. When we enter when we go into someone's farm, they sometimes have ideas about what they want, which is fine, and they just say, I want this fencing off, or I want this planting. But we always do try and look at the whole farm, not just the business, not just every aspect of it. To see whether there's any sort of improvements we can make on all of the aspects that are on there, from the farmyard infrastructure to soil management, nutrient management, water course, fencing and buffer strips, wetlands, woodland creation, hedgerows. And like I said, we don't have all of the knowledge, and I think it's important for farm advisors to have these collaborations, because I'm a farmer's daughter and I'm quite good with IDing grasses and plants, but I don't know everything. And so to take a collaborative approach, I think is an important step that farm advice needs to move into. But it is something that we currently do, and it works quite well for us to have these other organisations that we can ask these questions to. And we can obviously offer our advice in return, and it works really well. Next Slide, please. So yes, as Catherine mentioned at the start, two of our main targets for the farm advice and the farmer engagement is the actual diffuse water pollution issues from agriculture and helping to alleviate flooding. So looking at natural flood management. And diffuse water pollution is, we always call it death by 1,000 cuts, because a river might look like that photo in the middle, but actually it can be lots of little, you know, like a broken gutter here, you know, a slurry lagoon just overflowing ever so slightly when it rains heavily. There's that many different things, compacted soil, all these small things that a farmer probably doesn't notice day to day, and they all add up to this this diffuse water pollution issue. And we try and our best to, like I said, provide the right advice to farmers and try and get them the financial help to alleviate it. And the other aspect is natural flood management. Obviously, if we can slow the flow, if we can improve the water retention of the ground, or if we can put in leaky dams or any sort of infrastructure to prevent, when there is a heavy rain event, flooding downstream, we'll try and talk to our farmers about that as well. Next slide. So like I was saying, diffuse water pollution, there are so many different sources. Obviously we are just the farm team, so we are only talking about the diffuse water pollutions from an agricultural perspective. There are many others, but for the farm specific, we tend to find it's stuff like ammonia from animal waste, or fuel spillages, dirty yard water or silage effluent making its way into the watercourse. There's also stuff like over application of animal waste or fertilizers. There's also sediment issues, you know, poor soil management or heavy poaching around watercourses, pesticides and inorganic waste from tips. And this can have a huge negative effect on both the flora and the fauna within the channel, the water channel. So stuff like dead fish and invertebrates. There's also for us, you know, we're currently having a huge issue with fecal contamination in our bathing waters. There's also eutrophication, acidification, sewage. There's reduction in dissolved oxygen, and also from an economic perspective for the farm business, you know, you're wasting money. You're putting fertilizer on soil that's not going to retain it. It's just going to wash into the water. Or if your watercourse edges aren't protected, be that just through a fence or be that through trees, the poaching of livestock or just the natural erosion of the bank side, you're actually losing land. So yeah, next slide please, Ali. And natural flood management, just quickly. So we talk about planting new trees to try and retain water upstream. Right at the top, there's blocking drainage grips, woody dams, woody debris dams. We do riverside planting. We talk to farmers about retaining water in ponds or swales, or intercepting runoff pathways, which I think Ellie might be talking about later, and talking about just improving the soil management on the farm. Next one there, please. So how do we actually benefit farmers? Because we're obviously going to these farms and we're offering environmental advice, but like I said, we have the head of a farmer, and we like to think about you know, most of this advice, it all goes hand in hand. So if we can help a farmer get improvements to the farmyard infrastructure, they're happy because they've got a nice new concrete yard, and we're happy because they have the capacity now to separate the clean and dirty water, which reduces water pollution risk and the farmer likes having a clean and tidy yard. It all seems to go hand in hand. The same with the soil management. You know, if they can improve their yields through correct soil management, and if they can save more money by not applying unnecessary fertilizers to the soil, or if they can improve the pan, if they can improve the percolation of the soil to allow water retention instead of constant flooding, then they can get on the land more frequently. So yeah, we also offer advice for the stewardship agreements, and we will always try and find alternative funding, especially if we ourselves have highlighted a priority within that farm. Again, Ellie will mention that in a moment. But we've also found stuff like livestock welfare, fencing off stuff like riparian, you know, water courses or wet ditches. They tend to be areas that are heavily poached by livestock when they're going to access the water course. This can have lameness impacts. It's also a haven for parasites such as fluke, where mud snails can breed well. So if we can fence off this watercourse, we're helping us to prevent diffuse water pollution issues, and we're also helping the farmer to think about improving his livestock welfare. So everything we try and do, it all has to tie back to farm business, even though we're coming out from an environmental perspective. Ellie? Yep, literally on to Ellie. Yep.
Awesome, thank you, Heather. So at Ribble Rivers Trust, we use a lot of location-based data and evidence, and we use it in a piece of software that's called Geographic Information System, or GIS for short, and it's effectively just a system to map information that relates to a geographic area. And we use it to help us to identify potential risk factors and also potential opportunities to suggest modifications to farming practices or land use on small areas of land, both for the benefit of rivers and the wider environment, but also, as Heather has said, that could benefit the farm business as well. And so the reason for using a wide array of this location-based data and evidence is that we're trying to protect and improve a huge amount of river habitat. The stats are on the screen now. And we're working with a really large number of farmers, not all of them because there's more than 2,000, but a lot of them. And they collectively farm a really large area, which is facing a lot of problems. And we've got limited resources within the trust team in terms of staff numbers and funding. And so we perhaps can't carry out as many farm advice visits as we'd love to. But there is also only a really limited amount of funding available to landowners and farmers to kind of carry out those changes that we suggest on their lands through either agri-environment schemes or other grants that are available. So we want to make sure that we make the best use of the limited resources that are available to increase the chance that our work with farmers will actually lead to the most amount of positive change possible for rivers and the environment. So there's absolutely loads of map-based data out there that we can all access for free. So in this example, Durham University carried out an analysis that just looked at the shape of the land in terms of altitude and slope, what the land use was, and what average rainfall distribution was across, in this case, the rural catchment, just to predict where water is likely to flow overland after rainfall, what pollutants it's likely to pick up along the way based on land use, and where that water and any pollutants that it's carrying are likely to enter the rivers, and so increase the risk of flooding and diffuse pollution. So the output of that analysis that Durham University did is called SciMap, and it shows the relative risk of water flowing overland after rainfall, eroding topsoil and transporting it to the river, and so resulting in diffuse pollution. And the purple lines on the map on the right show where those high risk overland flow paths are. So the darker the purple, the greater the risk of topsoil being eroded and being transported to the river. So Catherine and Heather and any other farm advisor would take this map on their farm advice visit and discuss with the farmer whether there are in fact these high risk flow paths, that appear after rainfall and erode their topsoil and deposit it in the rivers. And so by identifying where these issues are, we can then suggest solutions that can benefit both rivers and the farm business. So for example, we could suggest the restoration or creation of hedgerows in locations that would intercept these overland flow pathways to help reduce the diffuse pollution that's entering rivers in terms of the topsoil that's being eroded and transported to the rivers. And it could also help to reduce the risk of flooding by storing some of that water that's flown over land actually behind the hedgerows and within the trees in the hedgerows itself. And also in terms of how it would benefit farm business, the farmer will have boundaries that provide better shelter for livestock, and there'll also be better habitat for a huge array of farm and wildlife. So there's multiple benefits that could be had just by being quite strategic about where you place or restore a hedgerow. And actually this SIMAP flow path data will be available for anyone in the country to recreate and use themselves, hopefully next year. And that'll be via an interactive online webpage that Durham University are building at the moment. We also worked a bit further with Durham Uni to build on that risk analysis we've just seen on a previous slide to enable us to identify priority stretches of watercourses that are at risk from the input of sediment, from eroded topsoils, the input of bacteria from livestock fecal matter, the input of high volumes of water, and any combination of those three risk factors. And those are the coloured dots that you can see on the map. And if we look at the map that's on the right, for each of those priority stretches of watercourse that are at risk from one or more of those risk factors, we can see the exact areas of land that drain into those at-risk stretches of watercourses, and those are those grey hatched areas on the map on the right-hand side. So those grey hatched areas are where interventions to intercept water and pollutants that are predicted to be running off the land are likely to have the greatest benefits for the rivers, whether that's through creation of woodlands or hedgerows or wetlands or other natural flood management features. So when we're out delivering a farm advice visit, Heather and Catherine could say to a farmer that this particular stretch of watercourse is particularly at risk of input of, sediment or fecal matter due to the land use, and this particular area of land is draining into that watercourse. And so that could lead to discussions about around feasible options of how you can maybe address that issue. So this is kind of a real life example. So this stretch of watercourse that's highlighted in red was identified by this analysis as being particularly at risk of lots of bacteria from livestock fecal matter entering the watercourse. And that's based on the surrounding land use and the shape of the land and the average rainfall in the area. And we can see the area of the land that's in the grey hatched area that actually drains into that at-risk section of watercourse. But then if we overlay that SIMAP flow paths, we can actually see where the highest risk flow path down that problematic area of the field is. So by overlaying these different data sets, we can identify a particular section of watercourse that we'd like to protect, the area of land that an intervention would need to be placed in to protect that section of watercourse, but then also the really high risk flow path that is the really key feature that we need to intercept to benefit that river. And this is the photos of that location we just saw on the map. So this same site also had a lot of poaching along the river banks due to livestock accessing the river. So what we did is we just fenced off the watercourse to exclude that livestock from the river. And we provided an alternative drinking supply and then just planted a few trees so that their roots would hold the riverbank together better and reduce the risk of further soil erosion. And in just a few years, you can see that the river has far less soil entering it. So that's benefiting the river and its wildlife in terms of water quality, but also the landowner isn't having their land eroded away anymore in the way that they were. So we've got another data set that shows the risk of sun exposure for lots of rivers across the Ribble catchment. So the more reddy coloured areas on the map are where there's few or no trees that cast shade over the river, and so the river receives a lot of sun exposure and the water is at risk of heating up in summer. But those blue areas are where there's good tree cover, and so the rivers don't receive a lot of sun. And actually some of our rivers in the Ribble catchment, and probably all catchments in the country, are reaching a point where some of them are getting too hot in the height of summer to support much life. So we really need to do something about that. And what we've done is we've taken this data set that shows us where there's kind of stretches of watercourses where all along that stretch of river there's a high risk of those rivers overheating because there's no shade being cast on them. And we've identified those as priority locations where just planting a few riverside trees would really help to cast that much needed shade on the river. So as a real life example, probably maybe just less than 10 years ago, we planted trees in that black hatched area on the left hand side of the map. And this is what it looked like beforehand. So you can see there's hardly any trees. And on the map, you can see that actually it's going to be receiving a lot of sun in the height of summer. And then this is what it looked like just a few years afterwards. So that long grass, which has grown up due to excluding the livestock from accessing it just by putting that fence up, that combined with the trees that are kind of in a bush form now because they're just starting to grow up, they're already creating kind of pockets of more shaded water at the edges of the rivers. And then when the trees grow further, this will increase the amount of shade that's cast over the rivers. And this data set that kind of maps out the level of sun exposure on rivers is currently being updated by the Environment Agency for the whole of England, and that should be available next year. And hopefully anyone will be able to access it and use it. So there are certain farming practices that can increase the risk of pollution if they're carried out on steep slopes. So we have data that allows us to see where slopes are greater than 12 degrees are, well, any level of slope actually, but as in this example, 12 degrees. So that when we're out on a visit, we can advise farmers that, for example, spreading slurry in these areas with a high slope could greatly increase the risk of that slurry entering the river after or during rainfall, or that soil in these areas that are on a high slope, which are the yellow areas on this map, those slope areas are at greater risk of erosion, which could result in topsoil loss and sedimentation of the rivers. And there is data that's available for anyone to download, that you can just get it online, that allows you to kind of view what the slope is across the land. So you could also take that out to farmers and talk about slope and how it can affect farming practices. With any advice that we give to farmers and landowners, as Heather's kind of already touched on, we have to consider current land designations where there are protected habitats. So whether those are statutory designations that are legally binding, such as SSSIs or scheduled monuments, or sites that are of local importance, which in Lancashire are called biological heritage sites, but they'll be called other things in other areas. And this is so that, as Heather said, firstly, we don't destroy important habitats by trying to create a different one, but so that we also know who else we need to liaise with regarding any proposed alterations to land use. So any area of outstanding natural beauty teams, or the RSPB, or the National Park Authority, and so on. And anyone can see where the statutory designated sites are in their area via the Magic Map website, which is a link at the bottom. And at Ribble Trust, we have loads of other data sets that help us to prioritise where we work in terms of ensuring we have the greatest benefits for people and the environment. All the ones I've shown you are ones that, in theory, anyone anywhere could use in the country, but that we also have a lot of data sets that are specific to our area, which I won't really go into. But as an example, we have this data set, which was created just for Lancashire and is owned by the Lancashire Environment Record Centre network, sorry. and it allows us to identify locations that are coloured in pink and purple on the map, where the creation of woodlands or hedgerows could help to connect up existing patches of woodland and increase the connectivity of woodland habitats across the landscape. So that we can see if, we've identified where a hedgerow could be created or a woodland could be created for the purpose of reducing flood risk or reducing diffuse pollution or casting shade over the rivers or any other purpose that the farmer wants one created for. We can see where that new habitat could have additional benefits as well as those primary purposes, and that's because as a trust we like to deliver projects that have multiple benefits. So we're going to have as big a benefit as possible for the resources we invest in these projects, because as I said earlier, that is limited. And then within the trust team, we've just kind of set up an app to aid our farm advisors when they're doing their site visits. And it just makes use of an existing app that we've customised and added our own data to. And it should be quite easy for others to do the same if they wish. And it displays the data that I've just been showing you, so that Heather and Catherine have all that data to hand without having to print loads of different maps off before they visit a site. And then those maps, which they'll just have on a tablet, can aid discussions with farmers and help to identify risks and opportunities when they're out on site. So the screenshot of the app on the left shows those biological heritage sites in orange, which are those habitats that are important locally to Lancashire. Heather mentioned that we do these pinpoint surveys when we're out on the farms, and we have a big data set that records all those pinpoint opportunities on farms that have received an advice visit. So those are the red dots and the yellow lines on the screenshot that's second to the left. So pinpoint opportunities are those opportunities to improve farm infrastructure or practices or land use to reduce the risk of diffuse pollution. And then crucially for the farm advice team, you can add to that pinpoint data set through the app. So Catherine and Heather can just record any opportunities they see when they're out in the field straight away, just by drawing an area or a line or a point on the app, and then just adding a few bits of information really quickly. And then that information will just be added to the database for the rest of the team to see. And there's a couple of screenshots on the right that kind of show that process. So that was a really brief look at some of the data sets that we use to aid our farm advice visits, to ensure that we have as big a positive impact as possible for both the environment and the farm business. And I'll hand back to Catherine before I baffle you with data.
Thanks, Ellie. So that is actually the end of our presentation. But before we go on the questions, I just wanted to do a quick summary. So for the Ribble Rivers Trust, farm advice is key to the work that we do. It's how we engage with farmers and landowners and work with them to build on positive mitigation for the environment that not only enhances water quality, but also hopefully enhances their farm business. So I was just thinking about this in terms of a summary of that presentation from our side of answering the question of what makes a farm advisor. And I think collaboration is one of the key ones. We couldn't go out on site without the work that Ellie has done. We're also not we're not experts in every single element that you need to help a farmer, and so making sure you're collaborating with other organisations and other people who have those skills is essential. As Ellie's just shown, the evidence and data that we have is absolutely fantastic within the trust, and we're always wanting to build on that. And that is what helps us to target the opportunities and mitigation methods that we suggest for a farmer, that not only helps that farmer, but also hopefully it helps the wider community around that farm and has multiple effects and advantages to putting that mitigation in place. But I think the key thing for us is that it's being able to engage with farmers and landowners is the key to what we do. So listening to the farmer, listening to the landowner, knowing what they want to do in the future, a lot of the mitigation methods that we do suggest aren't just a quick, easy fix, and they aren't a short-term fix, they're a long-term fix. So we need to know what their future plans are for the farm, for the land, to make sure that that mitigation is actually going to fit into the landscape and into their business plan. So that is probably it from our point of view, but this is a discussion, so we did want to ask you on the call some questions, and they're there on the screen, and I think I'll just start with the first one. If you don't want to turn your mics off, completely understand. It would be great if you could put some comments in the chat if not, but if you do want to talk to us directly, please just unmute and put your video on, and we'll can have a discussion between all of us about the questions that are on the screen. So the first question is, what do farmers want from farm advice? I'll just give you a couple of minutes to have a think. From our point of view, from Ribble Rivers Trust, we would say they want honesty, they want all the opportunities that we can see from what we look at, which is diffuse water pollution, but also signposting to other organisations and other opportunities in the landscape. So I'll open it up to everyone.
I think I'd agree with you, Catherine, where it's the reliability of the advice that you're giving and the trustworthiness, knowing that relationships that you do have with farmers, it's that someone being able to come back to you time and time again as a kind of consistent first point of call. We have actually had something in the group, in the chat, it says practical advice that they can implement and answers to questions they might have but don't have the time to investigate. Georgia, I think from my perspective, I think you're right. Go ahead, Catherine.
Yeah, I would completely agree as well, Georgia. We get so many calls from farmers telling us that they don't have time, but there's an issue, and so we hopefully provide them with a little bit of a breathing space so that we can try and figure out the solutions or the methods that we can suggest going forward. And yeah, completely agree, and that's hopefully what we will be doing going forward as well. It's something that works. Anybody else?
Michelle said advice that will actually work.
Yeah, again, completely agree. We, as I say, we were an evidence and data-led organisation, and we've worked in the catchment for 10 years, and we don't always get it wrong, so we don't always get it right, but we do definitely learn from the mistakes that we have made in the past, and we do try and make sure that the suggestions and opportunities that we provide will hopefully work as well. So I think one of the questions that we have in the Ribble Rivers Trust is, how do we improve? We're thinking of all the things that are coming in the next few years. We've got a new environmental land management scheme coming into place. There's probably other funding that's going to be coming out there. There is the pressure from the public for farmers to be more environmentally friendly, looking at the carbon side of things as well. So what do you all think that we need to be looking at into the next few years in terms of targeting advice for farm advisors out there?
I think there's a huge pressure in the media moving forward that farmers become environmentally friendly, and I think there's a lot of fear from farmers about what that actually means. I mean, most of the farmers that we go to, I think the average age will be 50, 60 years old, and it'll be a re-education. It'll mean changing farming practices that they learned from their grandparents. I think moving forward, a lot of it has to be reassurance and a lot of hand-holding, even though we as farm advisors don't actually have the answers yet. I don't think anybody has the answers about what elms will look like. I'm sure it'll be a very slow process, this agricultural shift, this transition. Yeah, weird time to be in agriculture.
It is, and it's a hard question to answer because obviously we don't know. We have rumours of what's coming down the line, but trying to prepare, no matter who you work for, whether it's for a Rivers Trust or another organisation, AOMBs, and anything like that, RSPB, it's trying to second guess yourself in a way. You're trying to find out what the direction of travel without actually knowing it, and it's trying to prepare yourself in that way. And also we don't know what policies are going to come in the future, and so I think with that question it's a hard one to answer, but I think it's, for me, it's communicating with everybody who you know and everybody around you to try and figure out what's coming. And we all know what the rumour mill's like at the moment, so it's a bit of a challenge. So I'm going to go on to our third question, and actually the fourth question I'll ask at the same time because they're very similar. So what data and evidence do you, I don't know who's on the call in terms of what your jobs and roles are, but we've shown you what data and evidence that we look at. Is there anything that you would suggest that we should be looking at as well? And basically, as farm advisors and farmers, landowners, land managers, what evidence and data do we need to make farm business decisions? And I think that's definitely a key one going forward. So I'll pass on to Christina just in case there's any questions or comments in the chat. But if you have a think of that, and again, please don't mute your mics or just please put the responses in the chat. That is completely fine.
We've had a question here. I'm not sure if it's in direct response to that question, Catherine. Do we also do knowledge exchange between farmers and advisors? Georgia feels that might improve advice too. Oh, and that was in response to question 2.
Brilliant, yeah, we do. So in our farm groups, we well, pre-COVID, we tried to do a farm group session probably once a month, if not once every 2 months. That was with both of our farm groups. During COVID, that has kind of slowed down a little bit. One group is getting back together more frequently now. And within those, we try and make sure that it's kind of similar to this tonight. It's more of a discussion, and we want to not just us as farm advisors talking to farmers about this. We want to make sure the farmers are sharing knowledge between themselves as well, and what's worked well for them and what potentially might not have worked well for another. And that is essential, and that's why as a trust we're definitely wanting to continue with the farm group side of things, because honestly it's one of the best places you can go, just even if it's just for a little bit of local knowledge, but to understand the catchment that you're working with, the views from the farmers, the issues that they're worried about as well, because I think sometimes as farm advisors we do look very much at the opportunities that are out there, may not potentially understand the hesitancy from a farm manager or a farmer's point of view. So going to those farm group meetings are key for us. The other thing with farm groups is that there's a huge social side. So it's not just knowledge share, but also just getting the farmers all together, especially after COVID, where you've not really seen that much. And I think that's actually coming out now in a lot of research, is that these farm groups are not just a knowledge sharing event, but also a social event, which is great to hear, really.
We haven't had anything to the third question.
Okay,
if you want to
that is a tough one. I don't know if Ellie, you want to speak there?
I don't think that farmer buyers and the farmers do have the evidence and data they need to make those decisions. I feel like it's very much, there's charities like ours who have some data. I feel like I personally don't know what is available to the farmers. I don't know whether they, other than kind of countryside stewardship guidance on how much they can earn, how much grant they can get for certain options. Beyond that, I don't know what kind of data they have to kind of guide their decisions. I don't think there'll be anything that they can use to have a look at their land and identify where risks are and opportunities are. And there is Magic Map, but that's mainly around looking where designated sites are and that kind of thing. So I do feel like without an organisation like ours visiting at the moment, I don't think that farmers will have access to that kind of information that will help guide their decisions in the same way that we might help them. Yeah, we do have
on the back of what you've just said, Ellie. I think it's a centralized location for it because it's kind of dotted across multiple platforms, isn't it? And I know the Forestry Commission Land Information Service has some informational mapping like that, but to join that onto the back of Magic and then onto going into the EA's data portal and figuring everything out, it's not straightforward at all.
You've also, I think you've got to really stress why what the data is shown is important as well. You can't just stick a map in front of a farmer, and even though they love looking at maps of their land, you can't just show a map of some flow paths, and you've got to kind of explain why you want to intersect these flow paths with certain features and how it will benefit them and that sort of thing. So yeah, how you use the data and evidence is really important, and how you kind of communicate it as well.
Yeah, Michelle said she doesn't think we'll do. She says every farmer are individual and very specific to their own experience and personalities. You need to bring more than just. I don't know if anyone has a response to that.
Absolutely correct. It's not just the farm or the farmer, it's the actual farm itself. Everything has to be tailor-made. That's why we always ask the question, what do you want? And they will give you a nice picture, because they're always proud as punch talking about their farms and their livestock and what they do, and this tree, and there's this breeding pair of waders up there. They know more than we will ever know about that land. Even though we have these maps and this data, they know. And it's absolutely vital that farm advisors listen first and then act second, because I've heard it from so many farmers that they've had people come on for advice, and instead of sitting and listening, they've said, oh, this is wrong and you need to change this, and you need to. It just doesn't work, because first of all, farmers not listening to them at all, because they know what's right on their farm. So you're absolutely right. Every single bit of advice has to be tailor-made to an individual farm, and they will tell you what they want. And it's about not changing the mind, it's about finding the compromise between you and the farmer to meet both the farm business side of things as well as the environmental objectives.
Yeah, absolutely. Georgia also says a lot of data is often requires an input to a platform or software, which needs training and using and then translating its outputs into feasible actions as well.
Yeah, that it still is a problem. It was more of a problem in the past, and there's more and more stuff going on to try and make it so that as much data as possible is available to kind of the general public who don't know how to use this software or to do any analysis or anything like that. And the more and more, say, the National Rivers Trust are trying to produce and publish data sets that anyone can access, and they don't have to do anything with other than turn a layer on and off to make these decisions. So it's something that I think people are kind of acutely aware of, and they're trying to work towards making it more accessible for more people. It's just one of those things that is progressing, but it'll be a while till it might be at the place where a lot of people would be happy with using it. But I think it is going in the right direction. But yeah, I agree that it's quite inaccessible to a lot of people at the moment.
I guess it's awareness of where these platforms are as well, and that they're out there, because if you've forever had this barrier to that data, suddenly knowing it's available is going to be quite tricky, I imagine. Yeah,
because they'll be buried in the depths of the internet probably. And there's also more and more of these things and more of these data sets as kind of technology advances, and we can do all sorts of fancy things with aerial imagery and that kind of thing. I agree that it's not easy getting hold of and using this data.
I think it's important to remember as well, I think there's still a statistic of about 12% of farmers still fill out their BPS through paper and post. I mean, these are, you know, like I said, the average age of this occupation is past the technological era, shall we say. They, even if they knew where to find it, using it or working out what it means, or too much time, too much confusion. It's like learning a second language, which I think is where the farm advice really needs to step up, because we can be that platform for them. Why does the farmer have to learn how to find all this data and this, that and the other? I mean, it would be wonderful if there was an interactive map out there that a farmer could just log on to, like the RPA, and see all this wonderful stuff. But as farm advisors, I think it's our role and our job to actually, you know, be this link and take that stress away, because as I think somebody commented before, they don't have any time to be sitting here looking at this data and working out what to do next. If somebody can just offer an ear and then say, well, actually you could do this or you could do that.
Absolutely. I think you may have preempted one of George's response to that, Heather, a little bit. I don't know if you've got the chat up yourself, but she says, I think frequently you can see all the data and the software, but understanding what it means in terms of farm management is difficult if you don't have a background in it.
I agree with that. I think
you might have addressed it already.
The people who often make this data, they're data nerds like myself, and it's like communication of data is such a key point of it. You can do all these fancy analyses and present them in really lovely colours, but if you don't clearly say what it shows and what that means, then it's useless. It doesn't mean anything. So presentation of the data is so key, and I think that's probably another key aspect of the farm advice, isn't it? Translating, if it's not already kind of understandable, helping to translate what these shapes on a map mean in terms of farm management. I agree that a lot of it is not that understandable, really.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there's so many data sets out there. I mean, Ellie she does a brilliant job of filtering these data sets of what is going to be useful for us. And but there's so much out there, so much information. And I think, as Heather said, as our job as a farm advisor, it's to interpret that and make it practical for the farmer so he can make informed decisions. I think sometimes it's seen as, well, they've got the data, they need to use that now to develop it from larger organisations. But if that data isn't practical and usable and actually explains what the issues or what they could do, or if it doesn't, it doesn't allow it to be translated so it's practical on the ground. And as Heather said, I think that's where we have to step in and act as filters basically to make sure that it's understandable for farmers.
Do you think there would ever be a time where oh, a lot of feedback, sorry, where say there was this, say magic maps got developed and it showed all this kind of risk mapping and opportunity mapping and was really easy to understand and interpret? Do you think there would ever be a time where farmers and landowners would just take that and use it to kind of figure out what to do in their land? Or do you think there'll always be a need for farm advisors to physically go out, have a look at it with them, talk through options? I mean, I imagine it depends on the farmer, doesn't it? But I would see that there'd always be a need for a farm advisor to go through it.
I think you're 100% correct, Ellie, because like even the youth coming through who might even have a degree in agriculture, they can't, you know, like we said before, nobody can know it all. All advice is key. Somebody always has something new to offer, bring something different to the table. And yeah, you're absolutely right that even in the future, if they do amalgamate a nice data set for it's accessible to everybody, and all land managers can just log on, that would be lovely. But again, I don't think there'll ever be something that has everything you need.
Yeah, I agree, and I agree with George's final comment. Farmers simply don't have the time to go through the evidence and data. From what I've spoken to and what we do as farm advisors with the evidence that we've got, we basically have to go and tell them, and that's what they want. They want somebody to go out there and then tell them and basically ask the question, is this practical for you? But for you to ask that question, you need to have basically put it in simple terms, or more practical terms for them to interpret so that they can make an informed decision. So yeah, I hope the role of farm advisor never goes away, else I'm going to have to think of a new career. But yeah, I think farm advice is essential for that. But that kind of leads us on to our last question, which what does the future of farm advice look like? And I think this is kind of developing from the evidence and data one. But there's been a lot of rumours going around of having one advisor per farmer potentially, going forward into elms and stuff like that. Do you think that's actually going to work, or do you think as smaller organisations such as yourselves, or do you think we should be continuing to provide that advice? Do you think it's more collaborative approach? I think we're really curious actually in regards to actually what people think. Well, firstly, is there a need for farm advice going forward, or do you see it changing in any sort of way?
Yeah, so Michelle's response to that is get farm advisors who have actual experience of getting their hands dirty on farms and understand what a farmer's life looks like on a daily basis and the struggles and challenges that they face. So the farm advisor can hopefully relate to farmers on their own level, in the hope that advice is taken on board if it's presented in a good manner and appropriate manner.
Well, I'm not a farm advisor, so I'll say that Heather and Catherine and John, who's on this call as well, actually in the background, they're all brilliant at this because they all are from a farming family, and we've only ever hired farm advisors who have a farming background, and it's so obvious the benefits that you can have from your farm advisor understanding farming and that side point of view, as well as the environmental. It's absolutely crucial. I agree, Michelle. It wouldn't work without the farm advisor having that farming background, I don't think, because you can't sympathise with that other point of view, and you're not going to get very far, are you? No, Heather's shaking her head.
No, I remember the days pre-farm advice when I was just working on the farm, and I had somebody come who I was asking for farm advice from, and they did nothing but tell me I was doing everything wrong. And yeah, I showed them where the door was. Relatability is a huge aspect. I think you're absolutely nail on the head there, Michelle, with everything you said, because I think I'm quite privileged to go to my farmers and we'll just stand talking in the yard, or we'll walk around whilst they're pushing to feed or anything, and they'll talk to me, not as a farm advice, just as another farmer that's giving them advice. I think that's one of the main aspects of it, and that's why, I mean, I've not got any bad feedback yet. So yeah, you're right there. Catherine, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think coming from a farmer's daughter's perspective, you don't want somebody coming onto your farm and telling you everything you're doing wrong. And that's when I joined the trust, and that's exactly what our manager told us, is that we don't go in and say you're doing X, Y, and Z wrong, this means you're going against legislation 1, 2, 3. It's always been okay. Here are the opportunities. Here are some of the good things that you're already doing. It's always good to point out bits that actually they're doing well on the farm. And there's always something, but there's always something that could potentially be is an opportunity for them to do more. And I think that's what we need to do. And as we've said throughout, it's listening to the farmer and understanding what they want to do as farmers going forward, and actually working with them to get these opportunities in the ground. And I think what my experience has been is that a lot of these farmers actually love looking at the data and evidence that we get through the Ribble Rivers Trust from Ellie. They love having a look at the land and seeing what is being shown from that piece of paper, but it's actually interpreting it for them. And then more often than not, they actually know the mitigation method that they need to put in place, or want to put in, what we would suggest to put in place, even before we say it. And I think it's key going forward is that we need, the practical advice of being a farm advisor, an environmental advisor, but it's never just environmental advisor. You have to be farm advisor as well, with a practical knowledge of agriculture at the same time. I think what we always say to farm advisors come in is that you're not an environmental advisor, you're not a land agent, you're a slap bang in the middle, and you need to see both sides going forward, and that's how you can build and get these relationships going, and hopefully actually help and support the farm that you're working with. So yeah,
I think that summarises it quite well, Catherine. If there are no more questions from the chat, I think we've covered everything, unless anyone else has anything to say from the presentation group.
I had one question. Obviously farmers have been under a lot of pressure for a long time. Do you think that pressure in terms of the environment and conservation is going to increase? And if so, do you think there's going to be more need for farm advisors to help the farmers to actually navigate what is being asked of them and what that actually means that they need to do? And I imagine it's a very confusing world for them at the moment, not just because we don't know what's happening with elms, but because there's so much pressure at the moment. Yeah, I imagine it's quite scary for them.
You're 100% correct, Ellie. I mean, it's a shifting world and nobody knows where they stand. And I think, like I mentioned before, you're trying to introduce something new to somebody that's been doing something that's worked in their eyes for decades, and they have to some extent got the ethos that if it isn't broke, don't fix it, but they're being told to fix a problem that they can't 100% see, because it's a different mindset, you know. Plus they're quite proud of the way that, you know, their farm, it's something that they've put the blood, sweat and tears into, and for somebody to say that no, you can't do that anymore, it's a stab at who you are. So that's why I think everyone's a bit frightened, because they think, well, if I can't do it this way, how am I going to do it? And they've got no example of seeing what the finished feature will look like. You know, will it work for them? Can they farm in this well? And more importantly, will they have the money to support their families and stuff like that? Because with the loss of BPS, which we all know makes up a huge amount of the annual revenue for farms, and they're being told that that's going, and it's getting replaced with this thing that nobody knows anything about. It's a huge scary time for them all. Yeah, so definitely farm advice, good farm advice will be absolutely key moving forward to help farmers navigate.
Yeah, I agree. I think every farm advisor has this discussion within their team, probably like 3 to 6 months since they start the job. And you realise the job isn't just farm advice. You realise basically your admin. You are sometimes a social worker, you are sometimes a secretariat, you are sometimes a farm advisor, and sometimes just somebody that they can chat to. And it's a very varied and diverse role, but ultimately you do see the practical changes on the ground. And I think it's something that's going to be staying around going forward as well. And I think farmers will need farm advice going, well, I hope farmers will need farm advice going on in the future. But yeah.
I think we've lost Christina. So if nobody has any more questions, or is she back?
I'm back. There's a brief panic there.
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah. Do you want to, should we just wrap it up if nobody's got any more questions?
Oh, good.
Yeah, I'll stop. That's fine.
Just in time.
I'll stop the recording.